Hello and welcome to the Elemental Digital Decarbonisation Festival. Elemental is a community for professionals making waves in heat, water, air and energy. I'm Dhruti Shah and I'm today's host for our session on energy storage solutions for social housing. Now, the growth of renewable energy and soaring bills has led to increased interest in energy storage, but we're interested in finding out what options are available for social landlords. How can we store energy as heat, for example, and what funding can we actually apply for? Please note that this session is CPD accredited and these are the learning objectives. By the end of this webinar, we aim to equip our attendees with an understanding of energy storage for social housing to include both electricity and heat storage. This will include the different types available and the buildings they are suitable with, compatible technologies, and some of the challenges landlords might face even when specifying energy storage at scale. Do feel free to ask questions and we shall come to them, post them either in the Ask a Question box or in the chat panel. And first, let me introduce you to our fantastic panelists who maybe have those answers that we're all seeking. We have Paul Rogers, who is a member of the Innovation and Technical Evaluation Team at NEA, National Energy Action. We have Andy Heald, who's MD of Gen Community Ventures and Energise Barnsley. And we also have Kirsty Tweddle, who's Sustainability and Innovation Manager, North Places and Communities at Equans. Thank you all very much for joining us. So to start off, I'd like you to introduce yourself, so beyond what your job title is, and also some of those projects that you're focusing on that's specifically around energy storage that you'd want us all to know about. So Andy, would you like to go first?
Yes, very happy to. Thanks very much for the opportunity to talk to you and your guests. So Andy Heald, Energise Barnsley and Gen Community Ventures. We've done 3 projects with batteries going back to 2016. And installed about 140, all on social housing in Barnsley. The first one was a network study in Northern Power Grid. That was about putting batteries in to contain voltage rises in order to be able to deploy more solar. Second one we did, we ran a 3-year project for bays for demand-side response. And that was retrofitting a battery in order to control it with a smart device and be able to respond to grid signals. And the last one, which we're halfway through, is installing 75 batteries, tenanted homes, under the Artigen Redress Fund, and that's how I know Paul, because he's my research academic partner in that project.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Andy. And Paul, can I get you to go next? Just if you could give us a little bit more information about what your job involves and the projects that you're working on.
Right. So my name's Paul Rogers. As Dhruti mentioned, I work for National Energy Action, NEA, the Fuel Poverty and Energy Efficiency Charity, and perhaps give a bit of an overview of what NEA does and explain quite why I'm involved in battery storage. So NEA's sort of very focused on fuel poverty, and it's a major issue for us at this time. We've got a dedicated energy advice team who are busy supporting members of the general public, and our policy and communications team are regularly being asked to comment on the latest developments around the energy crisis by the media. We're also a training provider and offer various accredited and CPD certified training courses. But many of our learners come from social landlords, and I was the lead author on a course, Decarbonising Homes, Technologies, Impacts, Solutions. And sort of one of those modules is on the role of solar technologies and energy storage. We've also got that one's a level 4 e-learning training course, and we've got a level 2 training course on decarbonising homes, which is soon to be released. We've also got a research team, and as Dhruti mentioned, I'm part of the Innovation and Technical Evaluation team at NEA, and much of my work is based around trials of energy-saving technologies in social housing. So we've run probably 5, 6 or more projects based around battery storage. So the first one was ones were in 2016, where we were involved in sort of managing some funding called the Technical Innovation Fund, where we were working with landlords and other partners who were installing innovative technologies, that those included battery storage on a number of those. And in 2016, the batteries were generally much smaller, so might be 2 kilowatt hour ones with perhaps only 500 watts output. And we've also worked on larger batteries such as Tesla Powerwall 2, which has got 13.5 kilowatts hour storage and up to 5 kilowatts output. And in terms of our most recent work, we're sort of working with Andy, sort of helping on the evaluation of his project, but we've also got a project in Devon where we've combined air source heat pumps with 10 kilowatt hour electrical battery and also heat batteries.
Having mic issues. So I was just saying, we're having, it sounds like there's a lot of collaboration already going on. So that sounds really, really cool that I think a lot of people would want to hear more about. And Kirsty, I'd love to hear more about what you do.
Thanks, Dhruti. Good morning. Lovely to meet you all, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today. So I'm Kirsty Tweddle. I'm the Sustainability and Innovation Manager for Equans in the North region. So I look after the Northeast, the Northwest, Cumbria and some parts of Northern Ireland. My role is specifically working with social housing providers and local authorities and working on projects on how we can achieve net zero together, and enabling that transition from the fossil fuels that were already in those buildings and how we can move forward. So my approach to that very much is around looking at the fabric, then looking at a low carbon heating solution, and then the renewable aspect in it as well, which is where kind of the energy storage piece and the PV generation comes in very much for us. I've got a few projects that I've worked on, so a bit of my history was very much on the social housing side of things. I recently moved into the contractor and delivery world, so I've got a bit of an even view between what a social housing provider would like and what a contractor can actually provide to help on that net zero transition. I worked on a project about 4 or 5 years ago, and very much linked into what Paul was saying, back 3-4 years ago, the battery storage capacity was very small, and the batteries, really, the technology wasn't quite there. And on those sorts of projects in small numbers, we did have quite a few issues with battery storage and needing to swap some of those devices out. And now we're kind of fast forward 4 to 5 years ahead. I've got a project where we've just installed to 100 properties with about a 2.5 kilowatt peak system of PV and 6.5 kilowatt hour kilowatt batteries. And we're just in the process of evaluating. Some of those have a low carbon heating system, and some of those are purely PV and battery only properties. So we're really interested to see what the comparison is, how battery storage with the PV works with that, and to get through a heating season, to see what that impact is. We've also been installing, like Paul touched on as well, the heat batteries. So we've used heat batteries quite extensively across a couple of projects within the Sunderland region and in Newcastle, where we've installed those in tower blocks to help remove domestic hot water storage units. And we've put in these heat batteries as well. So they've also gone into our project with PV and PV batteries. So we see the two working together to provide a full secure system for energy storage.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. There's a lot going on there, especially interested that element in terms of what the social housing would like and what the contractor can actually provide. So I hope we do go further into that in this conversation. We are already starting to have questions come in, but just before we go to the audience questions, one of the key things I think a lot of people are actually interested in is that element around costs. Like, when you're looking at energy storage solutions, what sort of costs are we looking at? Is this cheap? Is this expensive? Is this something you really need to set budgets aside for and seek funding? So in that instance, I'm actually going to go to you, Paul, first, and then I'd like to hear from the other two before we go to an audience question, if that's all right.
So traditionally, batteries have been expensive and almost similar costs to PV in some situations. In terms of the current wholesale prices, it's kind of ranging from around £2,000 for a battery system up to perhaps £6,500 for a larger battery system if it's wholesale from someone like Tesla.
Thank you. And Andy, also, if you can step in here, like, these solutions that we're looking at, when you're thinking about costs, are these solutions like one for all, compatible with everything, or is that something else we have to factor in too?
So is the battery compatible to do other things apart from solar
And
consumption?
any energy solutions that are feasible for our audience?
Oh, okay. I'll start with cost then, just to reiterate what Paul said in terms of we were paying something like $1,200, $1,250 for a 3 kilowatt battery, which 4 years ago might have been $2,500, $3,000. When you do get down to the reduced costs, you've got to remember then your other fixed costs, so installation costs and communication to the battery. So it's not just the battery itself for that period of time. It's going to be in the house and remedial action. So we try and bunch it all together. But in terms of people on the call, they're always trying to look for paybacks. And where we currently are, paybacks are for 4 or 5 years, for batteries, where previously they could be 10 years, 12 years. And in real terms, if you're saving 4 or 5 years ago with a 2-3 kilowatt battery, £60 a year perhaps to the tenant, it can get lost relatively easily. But if you're now saving 180, 200, 250, it's significant. So that's where we currently are. And in terms of, if I got the question right about why would you do a battery within the home for social housing? So through our projects, and I think Kirsty touched on hers as well, you're actually using the battery, I call it as the workhorse, because it's there, it's going to be shifting demand, it's going to be controlling heat pumps in one of our projects, it's going to be responding to the grid as well for turn up and turn down events. So we've very much gone on a journey to go from, okay, solar and storage, and we can talk about that in terms of why, in my opinion, should always be, solar should always be installed with a battery, particularly now that costs permit it, to the point where actually the battery in the home for me is going to be key, along with a home energy management system, a smart system, because that's the way our electricity generation is going. And I think social housing should be taken there as an asset class from consumers to prosumers to be able to benefit from the way we're all going to pay for our electricity.
Fantastic. I'm also going to get you to just speak a little bit louder next time, if that's all right as well, just so we can go above that noise. Thank you. Thank you. And then Kirsty, actually, I'm going to go to you next, and I'm actually going to take one of the audience questions, if that's all right. Noticeable savings for residents switching from standard hot water to heat battery systems. Is that something that you're comfortable with answering? And that's come from Reese.
Yeah, definitely. So we have seen a reduction in consumption in those apartments where we put the sun and batteries in. We're still in the process of evaluating what that looks like. And we've been actually working with National Energy Action's technical team on the first tower block project of 7 towers that we actually put that equipment into. And we're hoping to have a report that we can share by the end of this year, which we're hoping will share some of that detail around those battery systems. Some of the other tower blocks, the 2 tower blocks that we've done recently, just from picking up conversations with residents and some of their communal room leaders, they're saying now they're probably reduced from £50 to £15 to £20 a month on the electricity that they're spending inside the communal areas. The hot water consumption as well in the actual individual flats. Some of the residents are saying that they're only charging their heat batteries maybe 1.5 to 2 hours every 3 days. So with that, we're hoping to see that cost reduction in their energy bills, and that's part of an ongoing study as well of the reductions actually in pounds and pence. And I think it's been a great technology to put in, and although we're seeing the energy prices rising, some of the feedback that we're starting to get from residents is they are still actually seeing savings. So it's combating against that energy rise and reducing their individual energy demands.
Fantastic. I think you've also just answered Rob's question, where it's saying, has the team been involved with thermal storage technologies like heat batteries? So clearly, yes, as well. In terms of that element of the heat batteries system, if anybody wants to elaborate further on what that involves, please do put your hands up. Otherwise, I'm going to actually go towards Natalie's question, which, Paul, I might get you to sort of step forward with that, which says, how do you feel about batteries using Lion technology? Not good for the environment. What other alternatives are you seeing that make financial and practical sense? If I've said that wrong, then I shall apologize.
Yeah, so I didn't see the question, but it sounds like she's discussing the issues around lithium-ion batteries.
Yes.
There is an issue over mining of lithium. I'm sure there's going to be people will be looking at more sustainable sources. People are looking at recycling batteries. So for example, I know companies like Nissan and PowerVolt do have second life car batteries, which they've used with their domestic battery storage. So that can reduce some of the environmental impact there. If you're not keen on lithium ion and battery storage, you can go down the heat storage line, and there are benefits with that. As we've discussed, there's heat batteries. One of the things that you're going to need in a situation like that, it's a bit difficult if you've got combi boilers, and that's quite common for social landlords these days. So having a system boiler with some form of water storage gives you this option of heat storage. So you've got things like the SunAmp heat battery, which is a phase change material. It's a more compact thing than a hot water cylinder, and it's in a shape which is easier to fit into an airing cupboard than a large cylindrical cylinder, and it's got lower heat losses. So that there are other options in terms of being able to store heat. So for example, if you've got a solar PV system, you can have a solar immersion controller, and with that, a bit like a battery, if there's electricity from the solar panels which would otherwise be exported to the grid, it can divert that to heat powering the immersion heater on the hot water cylinder. And with that, you could potentially save residents maybe between 1 and 4 kilowatt hours of heating a day, depending on water use, level of solar generation.
I'm just going to step in before we go back to audience questions. And again, I'd like to hear from anybody who's willing to answer on this one. Are there some technologies that are far more suitable for multiple occupancy? So maybe Andy, is there anything that you'd want to add further around that?
In terms of multiple occupancy, like tower blocks and bits and stuff, all our projects have been on single dwellings, so 2-3 bedrooms. I might have to deflect that question to anybody. I think
that's fine.
I think I can pick that up. Definitely, that there'll be people who are working on the aggregation of how that storage unit for communal occupancy works. And I know that there's definitely technology now that you can put on an array of solar, and then they will string that individually out to all of the apartments, so you don't have to put all of the infrastructure in there. I'm sure that those sorts of companies are trying to link that in with the battery storage system as well. So they would have a communal battery store, a communal PV, and then the actual smart system takes that data from the different flats, who needs the demand, the battery and the solar will respond to it. So there is systems out there at the moment that would be looking at multiple occupancy in that storage setting. I guess with the heat batteries as well, it's the same setup. I know that some of the heat batteries, I know Paul mentioned earlier the SunAmp unit, and they have commercial size thermal store units now that can work up to kind of 50-bed hotels. So those sorts of units are things that we would be looking to put into some of our more public building projects, and taking out the requirement for hot water vessels and trying to change that into the thermal store units as well.
Oh, wow. So definitely in education at the moment. On that note, again, because this is your area of expertise, where Rob in the audience has asked, has the team considered alternative thermal storage tech for space heating like the TPO ZEB? Is that something that's sort of factored in within that? He's saying that the storage media is inert and suffers no degradation over time, and there's also 4 times more energy storage. Is what's going on with that, I guess?
I'm a little bit aware of the zero emission boiler. I think he's perhaps referring to a technology from TPO, and it is a very interesting system, and we have had some discussions with them. I believe it's got something like 40 kilowatt hours of storage, but basically it will work with a wet central heating system, and it charges on off-peak electricity, a bit like a traditional storage heater, but it can work on smart tariffs. such as Octopus Go. Now, Octopus Go, it's been a tariff which has a shorter off-peak window, only 4 hours, but it's that off-peak tariff has had a lower cost than off-peak for Economy 7, and it's typically been used for electric vehicle charging, but it's also very good for charging battery storage or a system like the zero emission boiler.
It's very practical. And I'm just going to get to Reese now, who's asked, are there any concerns over fire safety for social landlords if siting solar PV and batteries inside properties? Andy, can you step up on that one? Or
so for all of ours to date, we haven't had any issues. There was one series of batteries elsewhere in the UK had an element in the battery overheat, so they immediately took out the same batch. But we've also gone for outdoor rated batteries, so they can be put up typically where you've got small houses, where we are. You might have the old coal bunker. We'll put it in there, and the current batteries we have all come with metal casing. Paul might be able to correct me on the technical side. I can't see something specific in terms of what regulation they need to pass in order to be installed in homes. I've looked for it. I don't know whether you're aware that the different batteries which are available.
I don't think there's anything too significant. Normally the manufacturers would advise on things like that. I think Bayes did produce a document which went into safety around lithium-ion batteries for domestic use, and you'd be able to search for that on the government's website. So that's probably one of the best sources, maybe to look up.
Yeah, we have had some conversations with social housing providers around that safety aspect, and the fire compliance teams within the asset management department have lots of questions like this. And the batteries that we've been using tend to come in a metal box casing, and we don't tend to put batteries in the loft, and we tend to put them in cupboards inside, next to where kind of the electricity meters and things are. And because the batteries are actually cased, there's a space in there for ventilation to go in so that the batteries don't overheat. And we have a bit of conversation with the residents as well around not trying to overpack things around that, just to block the vents and things off. And the product details that we kind of get through from our manufacturers and installers, we've been able to work through that journey with the compliance teams, the asset managers, to make them more comfortable of the technology that we've been installing.
And another question from Reese is, I don't think I've asked this one yet. Have there been noticeable savings for residents who've been switching from their standard hot water to a heat battery system? Is that something that's sort of come through in terms of your experiences? Kirsty, can I start with you on that one?
Yeah. Sorry, that's what I touched on just earlier on around our tower block project. So in the communal room, where they've now shifted from a ducted heating system, and we've now put in a ground source system and thermal batteries, and they have actually seen a reduction in the heating and hot water costs for those communal rooms has gone down from £40 to £50 to £10 to £15 that they've found so far. The residents in the flats, they're reporting that they're only using their hot water systems maybe to charge for an hour and a half, 2 hours every sort of 3 days. So we don't actually have the monetary value on that just yet. It's part of the evaluation pieces. It's a recent project that we finished, but we can already tell from the information that residents are starting to feed through that they feel like they're starting to see savings. We're working on a study with Newcastle Council and Nesta for that, so we'll hope to have a report for that one that we'll be able to share, and that'll kind of come through our channels, and Equans' social media and LinkedIn pages will be sharing that report. But if anybody is interested in receiving any of the studies from National Energy Action later this year on one of our projects and from Nesta, then please drop me an email.
Paul and Andy, do step up if there's anything extra to add to that, because I think people are particularly interested in that element as we're in this cost of living crisis, etc. Yeah,
in terms of the heat batteries, what we did was, perhaps if I describe the project as a whole, so what we started off with was some bungalows and 3-bedroom houses which had storage heaters, and they had hot water cylinders with an immersion heater. So first thing was to strip all of that out and fit in a wet central heating system. The technology we were using for the new heating system was called Boxergy, which is a Scottish company. We ended up doing the first installations, I think, in England using their technology, and so it was combining an air source heat pump and that they have an enclosure outside which has an electrical battery. In this case, we were using an alpha battery, like the ones that Andy's using in Barnsley, whereas Andy's batteries are 2.9 kilowatt hours. These were more of the order of 10 or 11 kilowatt hours, so quite large batteries. And there was also a heat battery in this outdoor enclosure, which was well insulated. And I think that was quite a big heat battery, perhaps equivalent to something like a 260 litre hot water cylinder. And another part, in most of the properties, we were able to remove the electric, add a mixer shower to the electric shower, so that people were able to make savings by being able to run the heating, run their showers from the heat battery, which was charged on off-peak electricity, rather than running on peak rate electricity from the electric shower.
Oh. Learning a lot there. Go ahead.
Sorry, Julie. I think sometimes it can be tricky to get residents to take part in evaluations. And once the work's kind of being completed, we do try our best to get as much evaluation data from residents. But sometimes that does prove hard. As part of the retrofit space at the moment for domestic under PAS 2035, the retrofit evaluator, after 3 months, does need to have a set of data that they can actually look at to see whether or not the projects have been successful. And that's a process that we are undertaking for one of our projects at the moment, to collect all of that data in. I think we're looking at around about a 20 to 25% evaluation rate of the data that's starting to come through. And that's something that I think we need to collectively explore around the monitoring systems that we install at the time when we're putting the installations in, and not rely so much on the residents' energy data. I think you can make estimates about what you think that the reduction in energy is going to be in using average electricity prices. But I think it's really important that we get more integration with residents, and after that year and the first heating season, that we get energy bills and make direct comparisons.
That ties in quite well with one of the questions that's come in, where people had asked, what has been the reaction from tenants to having energy storage? And do they need to use their heating or energy in a different way? So in terms of that sort of second part of the question, do the tenants have to sort of factor in a different way of operating within their own homes? Who'd like to step up? Andy?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So it's interesting because all of us have gone beyond just battery for solar, increased consumption. We've now used battery in line with other technologies. In our particular case, again, it was controlling dual purpose air source heat pumps, so that's water and heating. And again, as Paul commented, it was going with the Octopus Alpha, which then went to the Octopus Go, and we've seen all the increased savings. When it comes to tenants and understanding, then we've done quite a bit of work on this. And our current project is actually, we give a data-driven answer to tenants if they want it. And all our tenants do this because it's in conjunction with Age UK or over 50. A lot of them have had an app as well. A higher percentage than we thought have downloaded it so they can see their savings. And then we do a personal intervention, which is akin to what we're doing here, which we then be to go and meet the tenant, talk about something else, and then talk exactly the capability of the battery. Because if you put a battery in your home, it doesn't say on the front, here's the output, especially social housing tenants. And the same battery could be double in size in terms, not physical size, but actually power. So, we have seen tenants realise that, okay, broadly speaking, it's just through solar, but in the evening it discharges. and it's paying for their base load electricity. But if they switch the kettle on, the battery isn't going to, mean that they don't pull into the grid for that particular time. But we have seen, and though Paul's been doing the follow-up interviews, with tenants changing, we've had others using slow cookers in a different way. One of the great things was when a tenant moved to one of these time of use tariffs with a battery, they could see that the house was being shifted away from peak electricity times through the use of the battery. But then they also then put the tumble dryer on outside of that period as well. So they did an action, because half the time it's there's a lot of studies, a lot of monies have gone to try and people to change their behaviour. But if you're doing it for them from a technical point of view, and then they can contribute to that, we think it's really good. And in all of this, it's about giving them more energy awareness, energy confidence. And along with the battery and an app, if you do it with a smart device, it means they have more control over their heating, but it also means you can then say to them, look, 27 degrees in the middle of winter, sitting in shorts and t-shirt, if you come down 2 degrees and have to put a jumper on, you're still going to be comfortable, and your bills are going to come down a lot. So the battery's a cog, but it's actually introducing a lot of other things, and part of your, the social housing decarb webinar thing, this is just one element of it.
True. So it's also culture changing as well as that technology. And on that note, I'm going to go to Wasim's question actually, which is actually about finance. So he's asking, have any of the speakers explored financed solutions in this sector? So financed solutions in this sector. One of the key issues with this sector is the risk involved, i.e. the percentage of bad debt, social housing churn and void rate, access, market risk and regulatory risk. Based on your experiences, are there any mitigations that can make this a far more attractive proposition? So in that respect, who would feel comfortable answering that?
I don't mind, because we've done financial modelling on this, and I initially kicked off talking about payback periods. So you're getting to a point where, as a social landlord, payback period is low, but the tenant's benefiting, unless you do something about being able to share some of those benefits. But we've done quite a bit of work on, particularly on demand side response, on additional revenues, with aggregating batteries. And that's why, under the redress program, we wanted to go for 75 batteries to have a decent size, 75 2.9 kilowatt batteries. And we have proven that in our tests, that through price signals, and we did monitoring at the local substation, we could see the difference it made. And then you could, there are early prices at the moment in terms of, yes, monetizing that income from a series of aggregated batteries. It's still relatively in its infancy, but there's more and more coming in European countries and others where there's platforms available. We're going back to the battery. If you've got the ability to control it, you will be able to plug in additional revenues, which then might provide the answer to the question, which is, can this be financed by a third party? And in our case, it would be the community. So, yes, is the answer in terms of financing. Are the revenues totally secure compared to the savings to the tenants? No, there's an element of risk in that. But I'm more and more confident in terms of, particularly when you're combining it with other technologies and the way the retail market's going to go in terms of who the winners are and what they're offering. For me, the biggest thing a battery says, go digital. You must have a smart meter. And up to now, personally, I've been appalled by the way smart meters rolled out. Personally, I would just want it mandatory street by street. All this is based on digitalisation and the ability to offer consumers better prices. And without that, the battery's only doing one of its jobs.
And I think this has been actually potentially hinted at before, but just a question has come in from Scott, so I just want to make sure that we can clarify this. And maybe Kirsty, you'll want to step up on this one, is, are you using storage as a local application or as a communal decentralized application? So just to sort of clarify where we're at with that one. And that's from Scott.
Yeah, so at the moment, all of the projects where we're working on energy storage is at a local level. So the projects that we've worked on within the tower blocks, each of the residents actually have heat storage individually attached to their own apartments, even though that it's a communal heating loop that they're attached to. Also in the PV battery arena, they're again attached purely just to each individual dwelling and the system on their roof. I was saying that there is some technology out there where the communal system is being developed, but at the moment for us there isn't anything on a domestic at the moment where we're using smart technologies to aggregate across multiple units for the storage units, but it's definitely something that we want to look at. I know that we are installing large scale solar farms and large scale energy storage solutions with those as well, and we're bringing in aggregators with that, and just touching on a little bit around the costs and the paybacks and things that we were just talking about there. So on a larger scale, when we can get that aggregator involved in it, there is an opportunity for the demand side response and the grid balancing. So when the demand on the grid requires that battery storage, you can get paid to have that back. So if you've got all of this energy in your battery and the grid needs some, then they'll pay you for that with the demand side response piece, and that's something that we would like to see more of in the domestic setting. We do have a project at the moment, a very, very small pilot with a smart home intelligence system that we've had installed, and that's make sure that they've got smart meters in there, but that's infrared heating panels, PV battery, thermal store. And we're looking at how all of that smart system and controls and sensors all work together. So there's a payback in there, hopefully with the right energy provider, on say an Octopus kind of go tariff, where they can charge during the night or the low peak periods. That'll increase the savings for the residents, but then also the system owners can apply for the smart export payments as well. So although it's not the rich pickings of the feed-in tariff era, anything that is exported back outside of that battery that the residents aren't using, then there is an opportunity for the social housing providers as the property owners to claim that smart export tariff back.
And so on that topic of innovation, I'm just going to get Paul in here in terms of, there's a question from Natalie who's saying, how do you see the future of such energy storage solutions in residentials participating in the grid?
Well, having a smart energy system across the country is going to be the direction we go. As Andy's mentioned, some of the issues around demand side response and being able to reduce demand at peak times will be important. And on a certain level, we're kind of already seeing some of what's happening in terms of behaviour change with some of the residents. So, in some of the interviews I've been doing on Andy's project, it's been interesting that a lot of the residents have significantly reduced their demand sort of during the evening. So traditionally, the 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. time is the time of highest demand. But one of the big things with battery storage is it enables you to supply the home with electricity during this period and cut down this demand. So some of the residents are, for example, in terms of behaviour change, they'll perhaps not cook in the evening, either cook at lunchtime or mid-afternoon as a means of making sure their battery is fully charged come the end of the day, and it will get them through the whole of the evening into the next day. So that's something you're seeing in terms of behaviour change. But also with better batteries, some of them are able to output perhaps 3 kilowatts or more. And if you're relatively smart in how you're doing your cooking, you're not necessarily going to need more electricity coming from the grid to be able to power your cooking. So it means that we can significantly drop the demand in that key period, 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. as a result.
Wow, I'm learning a lot about this. One thing I did want to ask, and maybe Andy can come in on this, is a question from James, who is also seeking the answer to what is the lifespan of this battery tech, though, and do they need annual routine maintenance to achieve this lifespan? So what's the involvement there?
Yeah, so the calculations, most of them are warranted for 10 years, and then typically in our studies we've seen they've still got availability around the high 80%. There's also legally, at the end of their life, under EU law, and which I think we've adopted, they have to be recycled by the original manufacturer. So lifespan is good, and one of the good things about batteries and tenants is, because we all understand batteries, it's not a alien concept, and particularly the ones where we're currently doing, they've got a little LED light on the front, which is like the LED light on your battery to your phone, and then the tenants can easily see when it's fully charged or discharged. It's just got 4 bars. It's something, small things like that, which make projects and understanding super easy. But I was just going to sort of try and echo to say, this is a tech solution for social housing. It is an exciting time. If you grew up watching Tomorrow's World, it's the sort of things which appeared on there, but now we're part of it. And in the last decade, we've had all these either interventions or technologies installed on their own individually and driven by a subsidy, where actually now in all our projects looking forward, we're saying, well, hold on, all of these things can horizontally integrate, talk to one another and benefit from one another's use. And that's where you're trying to take social housing in one go, which is going to be a lot easier than privately owned or rented, because it can really, like they're doing with vehicles, grid and everything else, it can really benefit regions. And we're seeing in the early time of use tariffs, you're having regional differences, you're having regional carbon prices. It will be part and parcel of us all doing this in 27, 28. But we're just trying to make sure that social housing doesn't get left behind.
That's really, really helpful. And on that, go ahead, Kirsty.
Sorry, Dhruti. Just with the life cycle as well. So I think that it's between 10 and 15 years would normally say with a standard battery on, say, a 3-bed semi-house. If you compare that against the life cycle of maybe your PV system, if you're thinking about how you have to manage your budget going forward, you might need 2 batteries in the life cycle of the PV system. That's been in there, and it depends really on the size of the house and the way that the battery's operated. So the PV batteries, they tend to be judged on how many cycles of discharge and charge that they've done, and typically on about a 6.5 kilowatt peak battery, you would think at around 6,000 cycles would be kind of what you would look at in a lifetime. So it is quite subjective of how many times it charges and discharges. But it isn't a technology that's just going to be 1 or 2 years and then you have to replace it. It does have some longevity in it.
Yeah. So I think we just lost you in vision. But sorry, I was going to say, I think you just lost you in vision, but maybe we can get you back again at some point, Kirsty. But go ahead, Andy.
Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, just to ask that quick question on maintenance. There's very little, but things like firmware updates to batteries. So whoever, if you're moving it to use a time use tariff, or if you're just software updates, you need to know what your manufacturer's doing there. And then there's the ability to turn it off, turn it on. So we might come to communications to the battery and the cost with that. But the ability for somebody to be able to power it off and power it on the old IT desk, helps, because that reduces costs. So maintenance is low, but there's other things where you might be sending somebody out where you're trying to avoid it, to make sure, all those savings, all the benefits don't have subject to these remedial costs. Sorry, Paul, jumped in.
Yeah, so it's kind of following on a bit with what Andy's saying. A key thing is to be able to maintain the battery online, because you want to make sure that it's normally charging and discharging, because one of the risks is, if it goes offline for some reason, it can stop that cycle and it could lose its charge. And once you have a battery that's gone flat for an extended period, it can potentially get damaged. And that's the thing which, if anything's going to reduce its life cycle, that's the thing you want to avoid. And so rather than sort of issues around maintenance as such, it's issues about maintaining the systems online and being sure that it's working as expected. Another thing that we've noticed on projects is that there are risks around so what happens with the current clamps. So for example, if you end up having someone getting a smart meter fitted or some other electrical works done on the house, that there's a risk that the CT clamp, which is measuring the grid import export, might be replaced in the wrong location or the wrong orientation, and that can cause issues with the battery as a result. So there is some care that needs to be done and monitoring of the system, but less in the way of physical maintenance as such.
We're coming to time. We've got not so much long left, and we've got a lot of questions, but I'm going to try and get us to answer as many as possible that have come through. And one of them actually is, what remote monitoring systems have you used successfully, from Jason? So in that respect, are you able to give any more information around those successful remote monitoring systems?
And so it's a great question, because if I take my first battery project, the battery distributor was very much, it was their monitoring system. It was rather secret, and we didn't have that visibility. So we had to go through technical engineers and engineers conversation. But the one which we've just done, the distributors in the UK and the platform's a Chinese company, but we've been commissioning the batteries. So we've been making sure the data's bespoke for us. We've been doing more changes, and which gives you a lot of confidence in terms of then rolling out at scale. So it's been the housing provider, their installation team, and then they're calling us on the day, and we're doing the checks with the kettle test. We're seeing live on our portfolio, and I can dip into it. I can see where there might be a fault or where the one's offline, and I'm happy to say, there's very few. So yeah, the ability to monitor and the ability to install, commission, and control them before, in terms of then call out to the tenant, is a lot better now, than it ever has been, and it does give you confidence.
Fantastic. And we've got a question from Alan, who's asking, what about recycling heat, for example, from waste hot water? Is that something that's going on right now, or there's the potential for? I'm not sure if anyone's doing it right now, so if anyone is, do step forward.
Well, I think it's something which you can sort of fit with showers in terms of wastewater heat recovery systems. So that's for example something which can give you uplift on the EPC score for a property, but it's sort of much more convenient to fit it when you're building the property rather than doing it in retrofit.
I think that's useful advice there. And here we've got a question from Ross. What heat loss do you take the properties down to before implementing new heating systems? So again, what would be a good answer? Any of you who works on that, please step forward.
That's an interesting question. I think we try and reduce it as far down as we possibly can. So especially in the domestic world, the PAS 2035, the retrofit designer will look to understand what fabric measures can be put into that property that's reasonably affordable and practical to be able to get the heat loss down as much as possible before we'd look at putting those solutions in. So we would always look for all of the standard fabric measures. The ones that we tend to have a little bit of issue with social housing providers is underfloor insulation. Especially if it's a solid floor, it's very costly and very disruptive to residents, but there's no kind of set figure that we'll try and get to. It's as much as that property can actually get down to. I know we worked on some projects initially for the social housing decarbonisation demonstrator, which was 90 kilowatt hours a metre squared. Getting down to that level is really costly, and it does take a lot of disruption. I think we're working more realistically on about 110 to 120 kilowatt hours per metre squared now.
So there's like a lot of planning involved here, it seems, in terms of what is a more bespoke solution to what the property actually is in that respect. On this note, Paul, I think this one's actually for you. What needs to happen for wider access to energy storage solutions, asks Wasim.
Well, I think what one thing is perhaps costs coming down. I think another thing is for energy performance certificates to properly recognise the benefits of energy storage systems. Because, for example, on battery storage at present, I don't think RDSAP recognises any benefit from a battery storage system. And a lot of landlords are kind of chasing the EPC Band C target and possibly higher in the future. And so if they know that battery storage will give them a good uplift, it's more of an incentive to install it. And also, if there is an uplift, it's probably likely that funding streams are more likely to be including battery storage in the future.
Okay. And we've got a final question, which we'll take from Natalie before we wrap up, which I'd like to hear from all of you on, is what is the one big problem which still needs to be solved in the area of residential energy storage? And on that note, I'll add an extra question to that. What would be your key takeaway for the audience to have along those lines in terms of where we are now and where we really do need to be? So Andy, if you want to go first on that. So the problem needs to be solved and the key takeaway.
Yeah, is it a problem? Not really, but I'm really conscious on the size of our homes and the weight and the size of batteries and where they're located. If you have to move somebody's shoe space, it doesn't go down too well, in terms of where you're going to site that battery. So that's why I was really keen in the last project to make sure there's outdoor rated batteries, if you've got the possibility. Because we don't, and we used a battery that was very popular in Germany for one project. It was just too big in the end. I took a cardboard cutout of it, but it wasn't the 3D version. And you had to open the door, and it took up too much space. So that's one of the key criteria, particularly when designing new homes. Can I ask, just do your last bit in terms of a wrap-up, which I think I should have said at the start, which is, if you think of how solar is installed with a subsidy, and all studies show, domestically, that on average about only 30% is used within the home, and the rest is all spilt to the grid with not being accounted for. So we did things really, really inefficiently, and it was, but it did get the price of solar down. So when we're looking at things now, and we've got the ability to install solar on east to west routes, not just south only. The battery's saying, okay, that 30, you're trying to do an extra 10% to get up to 40 in terms of education attempts. But then you're trying to save the pressures on the local grid by making sure that you get the right size battery, so only perhaps 10, 15% is being spilt, on those really sunny days. So that's one of the key parts of the battery and supporting the local grid, and why if I thought if DNOs were able to own them, which they're not, they would be driving the install of them. So that's the basic criteria where I start with. Yes, solar and batteries, they work together, they should go together, and then it's, well, if you've got a smart meter, and look at all the other things we can do with your battery working as a workforce within the home when it's compliant with your other technologies, particularly if we're going decarbonised. That's my wrap up.
Fantastic, thank you. And Paul, so something that needs to be solved, but also a key takeaway, perhaps something around innovation.
Right. Well, for one thing, I'm also aware of the point that Andy made, that there's a lot of export going to the grid. Originally, with the feed-in tariff, it was estimated that you'd use half of the electricity in the home and half would be exported to the grid. For a lot of people, it's 30% used in the home, maybe even as low as 20% for some. So solar PV will work with other technologies very well. So, we should be thinking of using battery storage so that we can time shift the solar PV so it can be used in the evening. We should also be thinking of using solar PV to interact with water heating storage and save on potentially gas or other things. And we should also, if we're going to be replacing gas boilers with heat pumps, solar PV and batteries are ideal complementary technologies, and there's potential there for solar PV to help power the heat pump, particularly in spring and in autumn when there's a higher heat demand, and also battery storage can be used to charge on off-peak tariffs and to help power the heat pump during the day. So this combined system should work very, very well for households, and it's probably the direction which we'll need to go.
Fantastic, thank you. And Kirsty?
Thank you. So I think we've touched on a little bit of the problem to be solved. It would be nicer for the distribution network operators and the distribution system operators to have a little bit more involvement around how much is actually being updated with the electrical supply in the local areas around social housing sites, so that if there is large scale PV and battery rollout, there isn't any issues with getting permission to install that, and there's no very expensive upgrades that would be needed to the substations at the end of the street. I think that collaboration piece could be a little bit stronger, and hopefully that's somewhere where we'll get to. I think currently inflation is an issue. And the last year PV's gone up 40%, batteries have gone up about 30%, and the lead-in times are now about 12 to 15 weeks. So that's something, although outside of our control, it's still something that we need to kind of get a handle on. Otherwise, it'll become too expensive to kind of do it. And also, I think some of the key takeaways is to always think about battery storage when you're putting on any PV solution. Don't always just think the norm when it comes to heating systems and hot water. There is hot water storage that can be implemented in there. With your social housing providers, always think monitoring, and always think about how will the monitoring be conducted. And not all social housing residents have internet within their properties. So how do you combat around that and include a monitoring system that's got some sort of resiliency or something in there so that you can actually get that continual monitoring data. And the last piece is engage your residents all the way through from beginning to end. What are they looking out for? Is it some lights on the system? Do they just need to leave it alone? Have they had the literature at the beginning that explains how to use it and what the behaviour change piece is? And don't ever forget your end user.
Fantastic. I was going to end, but I'm going to allow Reese just to put a slide in one last question before I do the thank yous, because it is a very practical question. So if someone can just answer that. How do you look to size a battery then? Is it on maximising the solar storage, or is it the energy use of the home? I think that's a fair question to ask. What should Reese be looking for before we say goodbye?
I think it's a great question. Energy use of the home is where I go first. And so just in our projects, we found a sweet spot where price is around a 5 kilowatt battery, because ultimately you want the battery to mean that the home doesn't have to use electricity when it's going to be most expensive. You know, so if whatever battery, if it's going to power your home for what you need for 3-4 hours, that's going to be your biggest saving. So the solar's a kicker. You can do this without solar. We've done it in our projects with all the other technologies without solar. So solar's just, you know, solar's brilliant in itself, but the battery is all about energy use in the home for me.
Fantastic. Well done, Reese, for getting that in, sliding it in. So always, you know, if you don't ask, you don't get. So I'm just going to say thank you so much to Paul Rogers, who was still is a member of the Innovation and Technical Evaluation team at NEA, Andy Heald, MD of Gen Community Ventures at Energise Barnsley, Kirsty Tweddle, Sustainability and Innovation Manager at North Places and Communities at Equans. I would also say thank you so much to everyone who's joined. We will be writing up a roundup of the key messages from today's session. So if you're not already, please do follow us on LinkedIn, on our socials, or go to the website, which is Elemental UK, for all the latest updates. There are several other festivals still coming up on topics including EV infrastructure, decarbonising healthcare buildings, renewable energy, and a lot more. And just a reminder that this session was CPD accredited, so do log those hours. But thank you so much.